Professor Thistlewick's Secret Life, a Hercule Poirot Mystery. Part 1, The Arrival of Shadows. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of Styles Manor, casting long, angular shadows across the polished wooden floors. The air inside the manor was deceptively calm, but for a man like Hercule Poirot, trained in observation and intuition, the subtle tension was palpable. There was a hush to the house, a stillness that suggested secrets, hidden behind the ornate walls and within the minds of its occupants. Poirot had arrived at the manor under unusual circumstances. A letter, typed with mechanical precision, had found its way to his office in London. It bore only the name, Professor Thistlewick, and an urgent plea for assistance. The professor's tone, though formal, suggested fear, a rare emotion for an academic man. Poirot's curiosity was piqued, for where there is fear, there is often a mystery, and where there is mystery, the little grey cells must be put to work. The carriage rolled up the winding drive, crunching over gravel and flanked by oaks that swayed in a restless wind. The manor, perched on a gentle hill, looked down imperiously on the village below, a sentinel guarding its secrets. Poirot's eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned every detail. The slight disrepair of a corner of the roof, the way ivy clung to the stone, and the movement of shadows beneath the trees. At the front door, a tall, gaunt butler named Jameson greeted him with an expressionless face. "Monsieur Poirot?" he asked. "Yes, I have come at Professor Thistlewick's request," Poirot replied, bowing slightly. The butler nodded and led him through the grand halls of the manor, their opulence punctuated by curious oddities, Persian rugs inscribed with symbols Poirot did not recognize, cabinets filled with artifacts from distant lands, and bookshelves overflowing with leather-bound tomes whose spines bore mysterious titles. Finally, they arrived at the library. The room was vast, lined with books and adorned with artifacts that suggested intellect and eccentricity in equal measure. There, rising from a high-backed chair, was Professor Thistlewick himself. He was tall and thin, his pale face dominated by a sharp nose and piercing eyes that seemed to assess Poirot immediately. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot," he said, with a slight tremor in his voice. "Thank you for coming. I fear, my life has become dangerous." Poirot inclined his head. "Pray, explain, Professor. You have summoned me for a reason, and my little grey cells are ready." Thistlewick took a deep breath. "I live a double life," he said, voice low. "By day, I am a historian, a professor respected by colleagues and students. But by night, I am involved in activities that cannot be spoken of. I deal with information, letters, documents, secrets. And now, I feel someone is watching me." Poirot's mind, sharp and methodical, began to catalogue every detail. The tremor of the professor's hands, the subtle glance toward a clock that ticked with precise rhythm, the tension in his shoulders. "A double life," Poirot said softly. "Intriguing. And dangerous, I presume. Tell me, Professor, have you received any threats?" "No direct threats, only signs. Doors unlocked, footsteps in empty halls, notes left anonymously." He shivered slightly. "I am afraid my secret world has drawn attention I cannot control." Poirot listened carefully as Thistlewick outlined the people in his life, the loyal butler Jameson, the efficient yet inquisitive secretary Miss Arlington, and Dr. Edmund Carlyle, a colleague whose intellect matched Thistlewick's and whose ambition could not be underestimated. Each person, Poirot knew, could be a friend or a foe. In mysteries of this nature, the distinction is rarely obvious. Over the next day, Poirot conducted a careful survey of the manor. Every creak of a floorboard, every flutter of the curtains, every misplaced object became a potential clue. He noted that a door leading to a small corridor was slightly ajar when it should have been locked, that a book had been moved from its usual position, and that a faint scuff mark led from the garden entrance to the professor's private study. Each anomaly, he concluded, was deliberate. Then came a visitor, Miss Arlington, the secretary, carrying a bundle of papers. Her movements were precise, almost rehearsed, and Poirot observed subtle signs of anxiety, quick glances toward windows, fingers nervously adjusting her hair, lips pressed together. She was attentive, yet Poirot sensed that she knew more than she admitted. The storm arrived in the evening, rain lashing the windows and wind whistling through the trees. Poirot took the opportunity to explore the hidden corridors of the manor, narrow passages known only to the staff. The air was heavy with the scent of wax polish and aged wood, and each step echoed like a warning. A faint metallic clink drew his attention to a storage closet, where Jameson fumbled with a small iron box. "Merely old papers," Jameson said when confronted, but Poirot detected hesitation and tension beneath his calm exterior. "Nothing in a house like this is ever merely what it seems." As night deepened, Poirot returned to the library, reviewing the day's observations, connecting invisible threads. Shadows lengthened across the walls, the flickering candlelight casting ghostly shapes, and the wind whispered secrets through the halls. Around midnight, a subtle movement caught his eye, a figure slipping toward Thistlewick's study. Poirot followed silently, observing a young man, dark-haired and sharp-eyed, attempting to access confidential documents. Poirot stepped into the moonlight. "Stop," he commanded calmly. "You have underestimated the vigilance of Hercule Poirot." The intruder froze. His gaze, torn between defiance and fear, met Poirot's unflinching eyes. I mean no harm," the young man stammered, but Poirot raised a finger. "First, we understand each other. Explain yourself." The tension in the air was palpable. Outside, the storm raged, yet within the manor, the true tempest. The collision of secrets, ambition, and hidden lives, had begun. Poirot observed every detail of the intruder's appearance, the worn leather of his shoes, the ink stains on his fingers, the watch chain glinting faintly. Each observation, each nuance, revealed a part of the story yet to be told. He knew the intruder's presence was no accident. Someone had discovered the professor's double life, and the danger was only beginning. Through the night, Poirot kept vigil, documenting every sound, every movement, every subtle shift of the wind through the halls. And as the storm's fury matched the unrest within the manor, he realized that uncovering the truth behind Professor Thistlewick's secret life would be a challenge unlike any he had faced before, a web of deception, intrigue, and peril that could ensnare anyone in its reach. By dawn, the first threads of the mystery had begun to unravel, revealing a complex tapestry of secrets, threats, and unknown motives. Poirot, ever methodical, prepared himself for the days to come. For in the manner of Professor Thistlewick, nothing was as it seemed, and the shadows promised that every revelation would come at a cost. Part 2, The Intruder's Confession. The morning after the storm was grey and overcast, the manor shrouded in a damp mist that seemed almost to cling to the walls. Poirot, though ever calm and composed, could sense the tension lingering from the previous night. The young intruder, who had frozen under Poirot's sharp gaze, had been left in the study for the professor to confront, though neither man had yet spoken a word. The storm had passed, but its echo remained in the uneasy silence of the house. Hercule Poirot began the day with methodical precision. Breakfast was served promptly at 8, and the professor, still visibly shaken, insisted Poirot join him in the dining room. Poirot observed every detail. The tremor in Thistlewick's hand as he poured tea, the fleeting glance toward the study door, and the way Miss Arlington moved silently through the room, keeping her composure yet betraying curiosity in subtle gestures. "Professor," Poirot began, his voice soft but deliberate, "the events of last night demand careful examination. We must understand why the intruder entered your study, and whether he is alone or acting on behalf of others." Thistlewick nodded, swallowing hard. I do not know who he is." He appeared suddenly, with the audacity of someone who believed he would not be noticed. "I cannot comprehend his purpose." Poirot's eyes narrowed. The audacity of the desperate, perhaps, or the arrogance of the cunning. "In either case, Monsieur Thistlewick, someone knows of your second life. That much is certain. What we must determine is whether this knowledge is being used to manipulate, to threaten, or to harm you." The intruder, a young man of perhaps 25, dark-haired and alert, had been silent since his apprehension. He now sat in the high-backed chair, eyes flicking nervously between Poirot and Thistlewick, hands clenched in his lap. His composure was that of someone unused to confrontation, yet there was an underlying confidence in his posture, a belief that he might escape accountability. Poirot approached slowly, observing every detail. "You entered this house under cover of night, and you attempted to access documents belonging to Professor Thistlewick. Explain yourself. What is your name, and what is your purpose?" The young man hesitated, then spoke in a voice low and measured. "My name is Adrian Lockwood. I have been sent to observe Professor Thistlewick. My employer wishes to obtain certain documents, but I had no intention of causing harm." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Observe, you say. And your employer? Pray, tell me, who is this mysterious benefactor who instructs you to intrude upon the privacy of another?" Lockwood's eyes darted away briefly, betraying caution. I cannot say. I am merely a messenger. I follow orders. But I was not expecting confrontation. I intended only to retrieve the documents and leave." Poirot's fingers twitched subtly. The typical words of one caught in a web he does not understand. "You are clever, Adrian Lockwood, but not clever enough. Tell me, how did you know where the documents were kept?" Lockwood swallowed. I observed. I followed Professor Thistlewick's routines. He is meticulous, yes, but even the most careful man leaves traces. A pattern is visible to one who studies closely enough. Poirot leaned back, steepling his fingers. Patterns, yes. Observations, yes. But there is more, is there not? You were not acting alone. Someone orchestrates your actions, and you are merely the instrument. Lockwood nodded reluctantly. Yes. I suppose you are correct. I am merely a pawn. Poirot's eyes gleamed with the satisfaction of progress. Very well. Then our task is clear. We must uncover the architect of this intrusion, and understand the purpose behind it. Professor Thistlewick, do you have any enemies, professional or otherwise, who might benefit from the revelation of your second life? Thistlewick thought carefully. I cannot say for certain. Perhaps Dr. Carlyle. He has always been ambitious, and our research has occasionally brought us into conflict. And then there are others, those who wish to manipulate knowledge for their own purposes. But I cannot pinpoint anyone definitively. Poirot nodded. Ambition, envy, greed, these are the motives that most often drive men to acts of subterfuge. We must proceed with caution, but also with determination. Adrian Lockwood will remain under observation, and we will learn all we can from him. The day passed with meticulous observation. Poirot noted every gesture, every glance, every slight change in behavior among the manor's occupants. Miss Arlington's movements were precise, yet he detected moments of hesitation, as though she suspected more than she revealed. Jameson, the butler, remained outwardly loyal, yet subtle signs, the tightening of his jaw, the twitch of a finger, hinted at unease or hidden knowledge. By afternoon, the first clue presented itself. A small envelope, similar to the one found the previous night, had been slipped beneath the professor's door. Poirot opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet, typed with deliberate precision. Stop your investigations, or the consequences will escalate. Your life, Professor Thistlewick, is no longer solely yours to control. Poirot examined the message, noting its careful wording and formal tone. Intelligence and strategy, he murmured. Not a threat from a common criminal, but from someone calculating, patient, and highly observant. This is not mere mischief. This is a game, and we must learn the rules. That evening, as darkness fell and the manor settled into a tense quiet, Poirot conducted a thorough inspection of Thistlewick's private study and surrounding rooms. He observed the placement of books, the orientation of furniture, and the subtle traces of human activity. Everything, he knew, was significant. A footstep here, a misplaced object there, each anomaly told a story. Poirot also interrogated Adrian Lockwood further. The young man, nervous but cooperative, revealed fragments of information, a club in London where sensitive documents were exchanged, a network of individuals operating in secrecy, and a pattern of observation designed to exploit Professor Thistlewick's habits. Each revelation added to the growing complexity of the case. Yet the most disturbing discovery came from Thistlewick himself. Late that night, as he confided in Poirot, he admitted a shocking truth: certain documents he had been safeguarding contained information of immense consequence, not only to himself, but potentially to powerful individuals and institutions. The stakes were higher than Poirot had initially suspected. This was no ordinary case of curiosity or espionage, this was a dangerous struggle over knowledge and power. Poirot, ever methodical, began to construct a plan. The intruder, Adrian Lockwood, would remain under supervision, and every movement within the manor would be monitored. Poirot would need to unravel the motives of the unseen forces behind the intrusion, determine who had the most to gain from Thistlewick's exposure, and prevent any further attempts to exploit the professor's double life. As the clock struck midnight, Poirot sat alone in the library, reviewing all observations. Shadows danced across the walls, and the faint sound of the storm from the previous night seemed to echo in the quiet halls. Poirot's mind was a machine of deduction, cataloguing each clue, each possibility, and each hidden motive. The threads of the mystery were slowly intertwining, forming a complex web. And Poirot knew that the coming days would test his skill, patience, and intuition to the fullest. Professor Thistlewick's secret life was a fragile thing, vulnerable to discovery, manipulation, and perhaps even danger. Yet Poirot, as always, remained confident that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, could be uncovered. In the silent manor, the storm outside long gone, the game had only just begun. The players were in place, the stakes were clear, and the shadows promised that every revelation would be accompanied by peril. Hercule Poirot, master of observation and deduction, prepared himself for the intricate dance of secrets and lies that lay ahead. Part 3, Secrets in the Shadows. The morning after Adrian Lockwood's confrontation arrived cold and grey, the mist curling around the towers of Styles Manor like a living thing. Poirot awoke early, as was his custom, and immediately began his careful inspection of the manor. He moved silently through corridors that had become familiar, noting the subtle shifts of furniture, the minor disarray in places that should have been meticulously maintained, and the faintest traces of footsteps that had been overlooked by all but the keenest eye. Professor Thistlewick entered the library soon after, his expression grave. "Monsieur Poirot, I cannot shake the feeling that these intrusions are merely the beginning. Someone is orchestrating a larger scheme, one that reaches beyond my immediate life. I fear there may be more at stake than I realize." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "Indeed, Professor. The intrusion of last night, the anonymous letters, and the deliberate observation all point to careful planning. Whoever is behind this knows you intimately. Perhaps too intimately. We must uncover the network, and quickly." Miss Arlington arrived shortly afterward, carrying letters and packages collected from the manor's front entrance. Poirot observed her carefully. There was nothing outwardly suspicious, yet subtle cues, the way her eyes lingered over the envelopes, the slight tightening of her jaw, suggested that she, like everyone else in this house, might know more than she revealed. Poirot made a mental note: even those closest to the professor could hold secrets. During breakfast, Poirot began a meticulous interrogation of Adrian Lockwood. The young man, pale but alert, revealed fragmentary details of his employer, a shadowy figure operating under the guise of influence, someone who manipulated events from behind the scenes. Lockwood could not provide a name, but he admitted to receiving precise instructions regarding Thistlewick's movements and routines. "Everything I did," Lockwood said, voice tight with tension, "was planned. I followed a pattern I could not alter. I am merely a small part of a much larger design." Poirot's little grey cells worked furiously. Patterns, manipulation, and secrecy were always telling. He asked detailed questions about every place Lockwood had visited in the manor, every object he had touched, and every person he had observed. Slowly, the puzzle began to take shape. There was more than mere curiosity at work, there was intelligence, strategy, and perhaps even danger. By mid-morning, Poirot decided to investigate the grounds themselves. The gardens, usually serene, seemed to carry a quiet tension, as if the very soil had absorbed secrets. He walked along the gravel paths, noting the subtle disturbances in flower beds and shrubbery, the impressions of footprints leading from the edge of the property toward a secluded gazebo. Here, hidden from casual view, were signs that someone had been watching the manor, perhaps for days. Returning to the manor, Poirot convened a private session with Thistlewick. "Professor, you must be entirely candid with me. Tell me everything about the documents you are safeguarding. Their nature, their contents, and any individuals who might have an interest in them." Thistlewick hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. "They are papers concerning historical artifacts, yes, but not merely academic. Some contain correspondence with influential figures, letters that reveal alliances, negotiations, and secrets that could compromise reputations. In the wrong hands, these documents could cause scandal, financial loss, and political maneuvering. That is why I have guarded them so carefully, and why I fear for my safety now." Poirot nodded. Knowledge, as he often said, was power, and power, when sought by the unscrupulous, could become a weapon. He began planning careful steps to secure the documents while tracing the source of the intrusions. The afternoon brought the first truly mysterious occurrence of the day. A loud knock echoed through the library, followed by the entrance of Dr. Edmund Carlyle, the professor's colleague. His expression was polite but sharp, his eyes flickering with something Poirot could not immediately identify, interest, curiosity, or something darker. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," Carlyle said, inclining his head. "I trust the storm has not disturbed your studies." Poirot studied him carefully. "Dr. Carlyle, your visit is most welcome, though I hope it is not merely coincidental. Professor Thistlewick's affairs have become complicated." Carlyle smiled faintly. "Indeed, Monsieur Poirot. Complexity is often the true test of intellect." Yet there was a subtle tension in his posture, a nervous flicker of his fingers. Poirot noted every detail. Ambition, rivalry, curiosity, one of these, or a combination, could drive a man to actions both bold and dangerous. As evening fell, the manor seemed to grow darker, heavier. Candlelight flickered against the walls, shadows dancing like specters of secrets long hidden. Poirot spent hours reviewing the day's observations, documenting every movement, every word, every clue. The anonymous letters, the intruder, and the subtle behaviors of the household staff all suggested that a larger plan was unfolding, a plan in which Professor Thistlewick's double life was only the first piece. The night brought more action. Around 11 o'clock, a faint scratching sound drew Poirot from his vigil. He followed it with the stealth and precision of a seasoned detective, moving through corridors and hidden passages. At the edge of the garden, partially hidden in darkness, he discovered a small, crude notebook discarded among the shrubbery. The pages contained coded notes, observations of Thistlewick's daily routines, and cryptic references to documents stored in the study. Someone had been mapping the professor's life in minute detail. Returning to the library, Poirot gathered Thistlewick and Lockwood. "Observe," he said, spreading the notebook across the table. "Every entry is deliberate, methodical. This is the work of a skilled observer. Someone who knows patterns, who anticipates actions. This is no ordinary intruder, this is a strategist, and we must act carefully." Thistlewick's face was pale. But who could do such a thing? And why? Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Because knowledge is power, Professor. And power, when sought by the unscrupulous, can become a weapon. The individual behind this notebook is intelligent, patient, and dangerous. We must uncover him, or them, before they take further action." Hours passed in silent strategy. Poirot instructed Lockwood to remain in the study under supervision, while he and Thistlewick began implementing protective measures for the documents. Every door was checked, every lock reinforced, and every movement within the manor carefully recorded. Even the most subtle actions, previously unnoticed, now became significant. The night deepened, and the manor settled into an uneasy quiet. Poirot, seated in his usual chair, reviewed the events meticulously. Adrian Lockwood had provided crucial insight, the coded notebook had revealed surveillance, and the behaviors of Carlyle, Arlington, and Jameson offered subtle hints of possible complicity or knowledge. The web of intrigue was growing ever more complex. By the stroke of midnight, Poirot realized that Professor Thistlewick's secret life was far more entangled than anyone had imagined. It was not merely a matter of stolen documents or intruders, it was a collision of ambition, secrecy, and unseen forces operating in the shadows. Every character in the manor, even those appearing loyal, could play a role in the unfolding drama. And as the wind whispered through the ancient oaks surrounding Styles Manor, Hercule Poirot, ever vigilant, understood that the next day would bring revelations, confrontations, and perhaps even danger beyond what he had anticipated. The game had entered its next, most treacherous phase, and the careful unraveling of Professor Thistlewick's secret life had only just begun. Part 4, Shadows of the Past. The following morning was draped in a heavy fog that hung over Styles Manor, giving the estate an almost otherworldly presence. The manor, already imposing, now seemed alive with secrets, each window reflecting a hint of shadow, each corridor whispering with untold stories. Hercule Poirot, who had spent the previous night reviewing every observation, began his day with precise steps, inspecting the manor and its grounds with his usual meticulous care. Professor Thistlewick, though grateful for Poirot's presence, could not disguise his unease. He walked the corridors with restless energy, pausing at doors and windows, examining locks and curtains as if their arrangement could offer some reassurance. His double life, the very secret he had guarded so closely, now seemed like a fragile barrier against invisible forces threatening to intrude. Monsieur Poirot, Thistlewick began, as they met in the library, I fear that the events of last night are only the beginning. Whoever sent Adrian Lockwood and left those notes is not acting alone. I have enemies, in academia, in circles I once considered safe, and perhaps beyond. Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled as he considered the implications. Indeed, Professor. Intelligence and subtlety are tools of those who operate in secrecy. And yet, there is one thing we must remember, every action leaves a trace. Every carefully hidden plan eventually reveals a pattern. The morning passed with careful examination of the study and its archives. Poirot scrutinized the placement of books, the angle of light through the windows, and the minor disturbances in the furniture, small anomalies that would escape all but the most observant. Each detail suggested the hand of someone accustomed to surveillance and the manipulation of human behavior. As the clock approached midday, an unexpected visitor arrived, Dr. Edmund Carlyle, the professor's colleague, whose presence had previously seemed merely polite. This time, however, his demeanor was noticeably tense, and his eyes flickered with curiosity tinged with calculation. "Good day, Professor, Monsieur Poirot," Carlyle said, his tone formal but measured. "I trust the storm has not unsettled the household." Poirot studied him closely, noting the subtle tension in his shoulders and the sharp glint in his eyes. "Dr. Carlyle, it is always a pleasure. I am sure, however, that you understand the delicacy of Professor Thistlewick's current affairs." Carlyle inclined his head, masking his reaction. "Naturally. One must always be discreet when knowledge of sensitive matters is involved." His gaze lingered on Thistlewick for a brief moment longer than necessary, and Poirot noted it, filing it away for later consideration. By mid-afternoon, Poirot decided to explore the less frequented areas of the manor, the servants' quarters, unused corridors, and hidden passageways. These areas, while seemingly mundane, often contained overlooked clues. In a narrow corridor behind the kitchen, Poirot discovered signs of recent disturbance, a small footprint partially smudged in dust, a faint scent of tobacco not used by any of the household, and a tiny, folded note tucked beneath a loose floorboard. The note was cryptic, written in precise script. Knowledge is a burden. Guard it well, or others will seize it. Poirot carefully examined it, noting the paper's texture, the ink, and the meticulous handwriting. Ah, a warning, he murmured. Or perhaps a challenge. Whoever left this knows the professor's habits intimately. They wish to provoke, to manipulate, and perhaps to observe our reactions. Returning to the library, Poirot began to piece together the threads of the unfolding mystery. Adrian Lockwood remained under careful watch, his demeanor now one of cautious cooperation. He provided additional insights into the shadowy network orchestrating the surveillance of Thistlewick's life, a web of agents, carefully positioned to monitor every movement, every interaction. Late in the afternoon, Poirot requested a private meeting with Thistlewick. "Professor, I must understand your past as well as your present. A double life is never born of mere circumstance. It is shaped by history, by choices, by those who have crossed our path. Tell me, who in your past could wish you harm, or seek to exploit your knowledge?" Thistlewick's hands trembled slightly as he recounted incidents from years past, academic rivalries, disputes over historical research, and obscure but potentially influential figures who had once sought his cooperation. Each memory, Poirot knew, could be a key to understanding the present threats. The professor admitted to past dealings that, while secret, were morally complex, some involving discreet negotiations, others involving sensitive information shared with a select few. As night fell, the manor seemed almost to close in upon itself. Candlelight flickered against the walls, and shadows cast by the tall bookshelves appeared almost alive. Poirot reviewed all the evidence gathered over the past days, mentally reconstructing the sequence of events, the motivations of each person, and the likely strategies of the unseen adversary. Then, a sudden noise broke the quiet, a soft creak followed by the faintest shuffle. Poirot, alert and silent, followed the sound to a small antechamber adjacent to the library. There, partially hidden in shadow, he discovered a series of papers strewn on the floor, evidently rifled through recently. Some bore familiar seals, others were drafts of documents Thistlewick had been preparing. Clearly, someone had been searching for specific information, and their visit had been recent. Poirot's gaze fell upon a small, folded letter tucked beneath a loose brick in the wall. He extracted it carefully. The letter, written in precise and deliberate handwriting, contained a warning. The past is never buried. What you have concealed will surface. Trust no one completely. Poirot's lips pressed together in contemplation. The past, he muttered. Ah, yes, everything in this manner, in this case, is interconnected. The present threat, the intruder, the anonymous letters, they all stem from events long ago, carefully buried, now resurfacing with the precision of a master strategist. Back in the library, he shared his findings with Thistlewick. "Professor, the person behind these actions is methodical, patient, and highly intelligent. They are not content with mere observation. They aim to manipulate, to test, and perhaps to control your fate. We must anticipate their moves and remain several steps ahead." The night grew deeper, and a chill settled over the manor. Poirot, seated amidst the flickering candlelight, considered the next course of action. He would need to investigate the connections between the intruder and Thistlewick's past, uncover hidden alliances, and identify those who might benefit from exposing the professor's secret life. As the clock struck midnight, a faint knock echoed through the manor. It was Miss Arlington, her expression urgent yet controlled. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, "there is someone at the gate. They claim to be a courier, but I am not certain. It seems unusual." Poirot rose deliberately, his mind already racing through possibilities. "Very well. We shall see what news they bring. But remember, in mysteries such as this, appearances are rarely what they seem. The truth is always hidden beneath layers of deception." With cautious steps, he moved toward the entrance, aware that each moment, each decision, could bring them closer to revelation, or deeper into danger. The game of shadows and secrets surrounding Professor Thistlewick's double life was far from over. And in the coming days, the delicate balance of trust, knowledge, and deception would be tested in ways that none of them could yet anticipate. Part 5, The Web of Intrigue. The morning after the mysterious visitor at the gate dawned overcast, a damp chill settling over Styles Manor. Poirot began his day as always, methodically inspecting the manor, reviewing the previous night's events, and preparing to trace the threads of the growing web of intrigue. Every creak in the floorboards, every misplaced object, every flutter of curtain or shadow could signify danger, or a clue. Professor Thistlewick, despite the precautions put in place, moved nervously throughout the library. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, wringing his hands, "I feel that the intrusions are escalating. Whoever watches me, they are becoming bolder. I fear my double life is nearing exposure." Poirot, calm and precise, replied, "Ah, Monsieur Thistlewick, the true danger always lies in underestimating one's opponent. Our task is to anticipate each move, to predict the next step before it is taken. And in doing so, we shall safeguard both your life and the secrets you protect." Adrian Lockwood, still under careful observation, revealed more about the network he served. "There is a central figure," Lockwood admitted, voice low, "someone who orchestrates all of our activities. They are precise, strategic, and possess knowledge of your habits, Professor. We are merely instruments of their will. I was chosen for my ability to observe without being detected, but I fear I have failed." Poirot's fingers steepled. "Ah, a master manipulator. And what do you know of their motives? Power, wealth, influence, revenge?" Lockwood hesitated. "All of the above, perhaps. But they are patient, Monsieur Poirot. They do not act impulsively. They test, they probe, they watch, and then, when the moment is perfect, they strike. I do not know their identity, only that they seek the documents you guard, Professor." The conversation revealed much, but it also highlighted a troubling fact: the threat was larger and more organized than Poirot had initially imagined. It was not a simple intrusion or act of curiosity, it was a calculated attempt to control, manipulate, and perhaps destroy. By mid-morning, Poirot turned his attention to the hidden documents themselves. He inspected the study, the locked cabinets, and secret compartments, analyzing the manner in which the papers were stored. There were layers of concealment, but Poirot knew that any pattern, however cleverly hidden, could be detected by a diligent observer. He found subtle signs of tampering, slight scratches near the locks, a faint smudge on a leather folder, and the impression of a handprint on the polished wood desk. Someone had been searching for very specific papers. Meanwhile, Dr. Carlyle's visits became increasingly frequent and seemingly casual, yet Poirot noticed subtle behaviors, lingering gazes at the professor, a curiosity that extended beyond polite concern. Poirot catalogued these observations carefully. Ambition, rivalry, or knowledge of the professor's double life could drive men to acts both bold and dangerous. As afternoon approached, another mysterious occurrence unsettled the household. A servant discovered that a cabinet in the library had been left slightly ajar, containing a small collection of letters and drafts of documents. No one had entered the room except Poirot, Lockwood, and Thistlewick, but the evidence suggested an intruder had returned, perhaps testing the household's vigilance. Poirot, noting the meticulousness of the intrusion, concluded that the perpetrator was indeed the central figure Lockwood had described, someone capable of orchestrating multiple agents, observing patterns, and manipulating circumstances without direct exposure. By evening, a breakthrough occurred. Lockwood, under careful questioning, admitted that he had been involved in an earlier operation in which a particular document had been sought, one containing correspondence between Thistlewick and influential figures in both academic and political circles. The letter, if exposed, could compromise reputations and alter the balance of influence. This revelation clarified the stakes: the adversary was not merely curious, but had both motive and power to create real damage. Poirot immediately formulated a plan. First, the documents would be moved to a secure, concealed location within the manor, known only to Thistlewick and himself. Second, Lockwood would be monitored continuously, not as a threat, but as a source of insight into the adversary's strategy. Third, Poirot would begin observing the behaviors of all other residents and frequent visitors for subtle signs of collaboration or knowledge. Night fell heavy over Styles Manor. The wind, rustling the ancient oaks outside, seemed almost to carry whispers of impending danger. Poirot maintained a vigilant watch, noting every sound, every shadow, every flicker of candlelight. Around midnight, a subtle disturbance drew his attention, the faint creak of floorboards outside the study, a shadow flitting past a window, and the unmistakable sense of deliberate observation. Poirot, ever deliberate, positioned himself strategically, observing from the shadows. The intruder, Lockwood had indicated, might return, but perhaps not alone. And indeed, a figure emerged, slender, deliberate in movement, and masked by the night. Poirot noted each detail, the careful gait, the angle of approach, the way the figure examined the room before acting. This was no impulsive trespasser, this was a trained observer, someone who had calculated every risk. Poirot stepped forward, voice calm but authoritative. "You underestimate the vigilance of Hercule Poirot. Step into the light, and explain yourself." The figure froze, and in the dim moonlight, Poirot could make out a partially familiar silhouette, a visitor who had previously presented as casual, yet whose curiosity had always lingered beyond polite interest. Poirot's suspicions deepened, the web of intrigue extended beyond what he had imagined, and now, the central figure may have revealed themselves, testing both the professor and the detective. "What do you want?" Poirot demanded, each word precise, measured, unyielding. The figure hesitated, then, almost reluctantly, spoke, "The documents, Professor Thistlewick. I need them. Your life, your reputation, everything is irrelevant. The letters and papers must be in my possession. That is all." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And who is behind this? You claim to act with authority. Yet authority is meaningless without accountability. Speak, or you will remain in the shadow of your own deception." The figure's hand trembled slightly, betraying a hint of fear beneath the composure. I follow orders," they admitted. "Orders from someone who knows the professor well, someone who anticipates every move. You will not stop them, Monsieur Poirot. They are patient. And cunning. Far more cunning than you imagine." Poirot, calm and deliberate, considered the implications. "Ah, patience and cunning," he murmured. "Yes, but patience and cunning are not invincible. There is always a flaw, however small. And it is my task to find it." The confrontation ended with the figure retreating into the shadows, leaving behind only the tension of anticipation and the knowledge that the network behind the intrusions was closer, more formidable, and more dangerous than previously understood. Poirot returned to the library, analyzing every detail of the encounter. The stakes had grown higher, the hidden documents, the intruder network, the cryptic instructions, and the growing knowledge of Professor Thistlewick's past were all converging toward an inevitable climax. And Poirot, ever vigilant, understood that in the coming days, every observation, every decision, and every subtle clue would determine whether the secret life of Professor Thistlewick remained concealed, or exposed to the world. Part 6, The Mastermind Revealed. The morning after the nocturnal intrusion arrived quiet and misty, the fog curling like smoke around the towers of Styles Manor. Even in daylight, the manor carried an air of foreboding, as if the walls themselves knew the secrets concealed within. Hercule Poirot, ever meticulous, began his inspection early, moving with quiet precision through the corridors and hidden passages he had mapped in his mind. Professor Thistlewick, still unsettled, joined him in the library. His hands trembled slightly as he poured tea, and his eyes continually flicked toward the study door, as if expecting the shadows themselves to move. "Monsieur Poirot," he whispered, "I feel that we are being watched even now. Last night's events were only a warning. I fear there is more to come." Poirot, calm and deliberate, nodded. "Indeed, Professor. The intrusions, the anonymous notes, the movements of observers, all suggest a plan carefully orchestrated by a person of intelligence and patience. We must uncover the architect of this scheme before they strike again. Adrian Lockwood, still under careful supervision, provided further insights. Monsieur Poirot, he admitted, voice low, the person behind this has been observing the professor for months. Every routine, every habit, every moment of vulnerability has been noted. I have only been a small part of a much larger plan. Poirot's little grey cells worked furiously. The network of observation was intricate, disciplined, and deliberate. The intruder from the previous night, though bold, was clearly subordinate to a more calculating mind, a mastermind who had patiently orchestrated events to achieve their goal, the acquisition of Thistlewick's hidden documents. By mid-morning, Poirot convened a private session with the professor. "Professor," he said, "we must consider your past, your professional interactions, and those who might benefit from your secrets. Every detail, however minor, could reveal the identity of our adversary." Thistlewick recounted incidents from years past, rivalries with colleagues, disputes over historical research, and subtle manipulations by powerful individuals in academic and political circles. Poirot listened carefully, noting patterns and connections. "Ah, yes," he murmured. "Every action has consequences, and every consequence may lead to opportunity. We must trace these threads carefully." In the afternoon, Poirot turned his attention to the manor's grounds. The gardens, usually serene, now seemed charged with tension. He observed footprints in soft soil, small disturbances among flower beds, and signs that someone had been watching the property for days. The intruder network was not limited to the manor itself, they had eyes everywhere. Returning to the library, Poirot analyzed the coded notebook found earlier, the anonymous letters, and the subtle traces of tampering within the study. Each element pointed to a single conclusion: the mastermind was exceptionally intelligent, patient, and familiar with both the professor's habits and the manor's layout. That evening, a breakthrough occurred. Adrian Lockwood, under careful questioning, admitted that he had once encountered the central figure directly. "They are cautious," Lockwood said, "but I have seen them. I did not know their full plan at the time, only that they were strategic, deliberate, and capable of predicting human behavior with uncanny accuracy. They are formidable." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah, and this is the person who orchestrates the observations, the intrusions, the warnings. We must identify them, trace their movements, and understand their motives. Only then can we act to protect the professor and his secrets." As night fell, the manor settled into a tense quiet. Candlelight flickered against the walls, casting long shadows. Poirot reviewed all the evidence meticulously, patterns in the intruder's behavior, anomalies in the study, and subtle hints left in correspondence and notebooks. Slowly, the identity of the mastermind began to emerge, not from a single clue, but from the careful accumulation of details, inconsistencies, and psychological insight. Around midnight, a subtle sound drew Poirot's attention, a soft scraping near the study door. He moved silently, positioning himself to observe without being seen. A figure emerged from the shadows, deliberate and controlled. Poirot recognized the gait, the posture, and the faint scent carried by the intruder. The person was no mere subordinate. This was the mastermind, confident in their planning, testing the household, and expecting their strategy to go unnoticed. Poirot stepped forward, voice calm but authoritative. "Monsieur, or Madame, your patience has been noted. But you have underestimated the vigilance of Hercule Poirot. Step into the light and reveal yourself." The figure froze, the shadows framing their form like a spectre. Slowly, a hood was lowered, revealing the face of Dr. Edmund Carlyle. His expression was composed, yet there was a flicker of tension beneath the surface. "So, you have discovered me," he said evenly. "I had anticipated many obstacles, but not the remarkable insight of Monsieur Poirot." Poirot's gaze was steady, precise. "Dr. Carlyle, the duplicity, the orchestrated intrusions, the anonymous letters, all your doing. You sought the documents for ambition, power, perhaps revenge, yet you misjudged the vigilance of this house and the clarity of observation. Explain yourself. Why target Professor Thistlewick? Carlyle's eyes hardened. Knowledge is power, Monsieur Poirot. Thistlewick possesses documents that could influence decisions, alter reputations, and shift influence in circles far beyond academia. I sought them because I could, because I was capable, because patience and strategy demanded it. I did not anticipate discovery, but now, the game is revealed. Poirot's fingers steepled. A master strategist, yes, but even the most patient and cunning have flaws. Your pride, your belief in control, has brought you here, to the edge of exposure. You have orchestrated much, but you have not considered all possibilities. Carlyle's composure faltered slightly, betraying the first hint of fear. Poirot observed every micro-expression, every subtle gesture, cataloguing the weaknesses that would ensure the professor's safety and the eventual recovery of the documents. By the early hours of the morning, Carlyle was securely detained, and the hidden documents were moved to a location known only to Thistlewick and Poirot. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but Poirot understood that the danger was far from over. The web of secrets, past rivalries, and hidden knowledge had been exposed, yet the consequences of these revelations would continue to unfold. Professor Thistlewick, though relieved, was visibly shaken. Monsieur Poirot, he said, voice trembling, I cannot thank you enough. Without your insight, I do not know what might have happened. Poirot smiled faintly, his demeanor calm and precise. Ah, Professor, vigilance and careful observation are the true protectors of knowledge. We have acted, but remember, secrets, once unearthed, have a life of their own. One must always remain watchful. The night outside Styles Manor was calm, yet within the walls, the echoes of the confrontation lingered. The mystery of Professor Thistlewick's secret life had revealed its mastermind, but the complexities of human ambition, greed, and intellect ensured that the story was far from complete. Poirot, ever vigilant, prepared for the days to come, knowing that in the game of secrets, the smallest detail could tip the balance between safety and peril. Part 7, Revelations and Resolution. The dawn broke over Styles Manor with a pale, grey light, casting long shadows across the misty grounds. Though the immediate threat had been identified and Dr. Carlyle secured, a quiet tension lingered. Professor Thistlewick moved through the corridors with deliberate care, still unsettled by the events of recent days. Even in daylight, the manor seemed to hum with the echoes of secrets long hidden. Hercule Poirot, ever methodical, began his morning with a comprehensive review of all events, the intrusions, the anonymous letters, the coded notebook, the subtle behaviors of staff, and the eventual revelation of the mastermind. He noted every detail, every nuance, and every connection that had brought the truth to light. There were, however, lingering questions, residual threads that required resolution to ensure Thistlewick's safety and the preservation of his reputation. Poirot gathered Professor Thistlewick and Adrian Lockwood in the library. Now, he began, his tone calm but deliberate, we must examine the consequences of recent events and ensure that no hidden elements remain unchecked. The adversary was clever, yes, but not infallible. Every plan contains weakness. Every deception leaves a trace. Lockwood, still pale but composed, listened intently. Monsieur Poirot, he said, I have followed orders, but I now understand the full consequences of my actions. I wish to aid in making amends. Poirot nodded. Very well, Adrian. Your cooperation is crucial, and it shall be noted. We must also consider the behaviors and motives of those who may have unwittingly or deliberately aided the mastermind. He glanced toward Miss Arlington and Jameson, who observed quietly, their expressions carefully neutral. Even those who appear loyal must be scrutinized. Patterns may emerge that were previously unnoticed. As the morning progressed, Poirot conducted a meticulous review of the manor's recent occurrences. He reconstructed the sequence of intrusions, traced the movements of Lockwood, analyzed the notes and letters, and examined the subtle indications left by Carlyle. With each detail, the picture of manipulation and ambition became clearer. It was during this investigation that Poirot uncovered an unexpected clue. A previously overlooked ledger, tucked into a corner of Thistlewick's study, contained records of correspondence, letters, invitations, and transactions, that had never been mentioned. Upon careful inspection, Poirot noticed that some of these letters bore subtle marks, initials in the corner, faint smudges of ink, and slight creases indicating deliberate handling. These marks suggested that someone other than Carlyle had been aware of the document's importance and may have influenced events from the shadows. Poirot called Professor Thistlewick and Lockwood to examine the ledger. "Observe," he said, pointing to the marks. "These indicate prior knowledge of the significance of these letters. Someone has been manipulating the circumstances subtly, preparing the way for Carlyle's more overt actions. This is not merely the work of a single mastermind, it is a collaboration of cunning minds, each playing a part." Thistlewick's eyes widened. "You mean, there may be others? People I trusted?" Poirot's gaze was calm but penetrating. "Possibly. Yet we must proceed methodically. Suspicion alone is not evidence. Observation, deduction, and understanding of motives are the tools we require. Patterns, no matter how intricate, always reveal the truth when examined with care." By midday, the final confrontation occurred. Poirot summoned Dr. Carlyle, Adrian Lockwood, Professor Thistlewick, and the household staff to the library. With precision, he laid out the sequence of events, from the earliest signs of observation to the intrusion, the letters, and the coded notebook. He demonstrated how each element connected to the mastermind strategy and revealed the subtle manipulations of those who may have aided the plot unknowingly. Carlyle, visibly unsettled, attempted to interject, but Poirot's calm authority left no room for deception. "You see, Dr. Carlyle," Poirot said, "every action has been anticipated. Your skill in planning was formidable, but not flawless. You overlooked the small signs, the marks on letters, the subtle patterns in daily routines, the behavior of your agents. It is these details that have revealed your intentions." Poirot then turned to Thistlewick. "Professor, your double life was vulnerable precisely because of the value of knowledge. But your careful habits, coupled with observation and reason, have preserved the integrity of your secrets. You have been tested, yes, but also protected by the vigilance we have maintained." Adrian Lockwood stepped forward. "Monsieur Poirot, I now understand the depth of the game I was part of. I will remain vigilant and assist in securing all documents. The professor's secrets must be preserved, no matter the cost." Poirot nodded approvingly. "Very good. Awareness, vigilance, and reason are the true safeguards of knowledge." As the day waned, Styles Manor seemed to exhale, releasing the tension that had gripped its walls for so long. The immediate threats had been neutralized, the mastermind exposed, and the hidden collaborators understood. Yet Poirot, ever vigilant, reminded all present that the consequences of secrecy are never fully known. Knowledge carries weight, influence, and danger, and those who wield it must do so with care. Professor Thistlewick, now able to breathe more freely, expressed his profound gratitude. "Monsieur Poirot, I am indebted to you. Without your insight, I cannot imagine what might have occurred." Poirot's expression softened, yet remained precise. "Ah, Professor, the value of vigilance and observation cannot be overstated. The game of secrets is never truly over, but understanding, foresight, and careful deduction allow one to navigate its perils. Remember always, the little gray cells are our most reliable guide." As night fell over the manor, the last shadows dissipated with the candlelight. The immediate danger had passed, the mystery of Professor Thistlewick's secret life had been revealed, and justice, in the meticulous and inevitable way that Poirot orchestrates, had been served. Yet within the quiet of Styles Manor, there remained the subtle reminder that secrets, once unearthed, leave echoes that linger indefinitely. Hercule Poirot, seated in his usual chair, reflected on the events, the careful orchestration of intrusions, the ambition of a cunning mastermind, the role of observation and intuition, and the resilience of a man whose knowledge had made him both vulnerable and formidable. In the end, the game had been played, the threads untangled, and the truth revealed, not by force, but by the methodical, unwavering application of reason, insight, and the little gray cells. And with that, the secrets of Professor Thistlewick's double life were finally laid bare.